So joining us now with his insight on the past week is the host of the WGN Political Report, Paul Lisnick. Lots of stuff happening every week.
Yeah, and I got to get back to the Taylor Swift concert. So.
Okay, well, we'll be fast here. We'll be fast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Let's start with Brandon Johnson, our new mayor here in the city of Chicago. Lots of stuff going on. Memorial Day, the worst as far as violence is concerned. Set a record, definitely. 11 killed, 47 wounded. He set out more police officers. He did this. He was everywhere. What happened?
Well, the violence was hitting in places it hadn't even hit before. Lakeview, getting hit a lot. I mean, look, it's same problem, different mayor. And so, yes, he did talk about having the cops out there and also having some social work help out there. But, you know, the bottom line is he's only been in office for a couple of weeks. I think the volume of this violence may have taken him off guard by surprise.
Do you find that he did a lot of bravado, a lot of talking about, oh, this isn't going to happen, we're doing this, we're doing that, a little bit different than the former mayor?
Well, that is a really major point, because I think in the hope that he speaks bravado, to use your word, we're going to have all this under control, motivating police officers, that kind of thing. The thought is that somehow the bad folks wouldn't show up and do any shooting. That didn't happen. Look, he's going to go through a bit of a learning curve, but he doesn't have much. He's in his honeymoon period right now, and I think people are cutting him a little bit of a break. It's brand new, but this can't continue on, say, through 4th of July.
The other problem.
Go ahead.
The other problem that he inherited was the migrant crisis here in Chicago. The city council dedicated $51 million to that issue, but there was pushback that not enough is being done for Chicago residents who are in need right now, particularly in the black and brown community.
Yeah, first of all, you had 51 million on that, and that only gets us through June.
Right.
So while that will go to a variety of purposes, they need to come up with more money. State, federal, somewhere. The city doesn't seem to have it. You are right. There were several older people. Jeanette Taylor giving a passion speech.
Take care of home first.
Exactly. And by the way, the thought is, yes, he needs to do all of that, but he needs to be very visible about doing both of those. Trying to find housing for all of these folks. Is it just the migrants? What about the homeless here in the city? They've got to find a way to say that both problems need to be addressed, and many members of the Black Caucus were demanding that.
Well, let's talk about the debt ceiling, since we just heard President talk about it. Talking about it was a bipartisan deal, and Kevin McCarthy was everything. He was so, very nice about it, and he kept to his word.
That was nice to say.
Yeah, it was nice to say. Why did he say that?
Well, look, when the president was asked a few days ago, why aren't you out there sort of pushing this deal? He sort of smiled and said, because if I do that, it's not going to pass. So regardless of what people think of Joe Biden, he's been a senator for a million years, right? And he understands how deals get made and how the sausage gets made. So he knew to stay out of it. He also knew that tonight to get up there and just, take all the credit for everything would have been a huge mistake. So by getting up there, he not only thanked McCarthy, as you know, he thanked McConnell. He sort of thanked everyone. The one thing I wish he hadn't done, there was one moment where he sort of invited people to support him for his reelection bid. He probably should have kept that out of it.
We talked a lot about that and how, his infrastructure deal and all those other things are all in place because of this.
Exactly. But I imagine any president would do some of that. But looking at November of next year, probably could have been skipped. But that being said, the fact that he shared the compliments, I thought was a smart thing to do tonight. It lets all of them go out and deal with constituents and look good.
Does this set the precedent for now a recurring problem where the economy gets held hostage every couple of years, Paul?
It's really, that could be, because there's no number on this particular 2-year ceiling, so which is to say that however high the debt goes over the next 2 years, we'll know who the next president is, whatever that number is. There is a question as to whether we have sort of the budget being taken, or the ceiling being taken hostage in the future every 2 years. But I have a funny feeling we'll just see who the next president is, who controls Congress, and then when that happens, that kind of thing tends to work itself out. Remember, under Trump, when Republicans controlled, Democrats went along. You didn't have these kinds of battles you had this time around. So it depends who the players are at that time.
So you're talking about the next president. All sorts of people are jumping in Republican
side. They are now, right?
Yeah, Chris Christie next week. Once a foe, once a friend, now a foe of Donald Trump. Isn't this splitting up the ticket a little bit? You've got DeSantis in there. Pence is going to announce soon.
Micah, they all kind of represent different factions. My take on Chris Christie is he knows he can't win. I mean, he's polling at like 1%. I think you need at least a few more percent to even get in the debates. Chris Christie is going in there to challenge Donald Trump on the debate stage. I truly think that is his purpose. It might be a little revenge. Trump did give him COVID, apparently. Remember that. So, I mean, ended up in the hospital. Very serious for him. But I don't know that that's part of it. But I really do think he sees his role as going after Trump like nobody else can go after Donald Trump. So he'll play that role. Mike Pence, he's going to have to look today. Good news on Mike Pence. You're probably going to ask me about this, but he gets cleared today on the documents charge. So now it's Biden and Trump who are facing that. Mike Pence gets a pass on that. Although again, it wasn't about owning. I've said this and I've said it in the past. It's not about having the documents. It's what did you do when you found them, and that's where forget Pence now, he turned them all back. Biden and Trump differ on how they handled it.
The other news about Trump was that he was reportedly caught on tape acknowledging that he did not actually take aim at the documents the way that he said he had done earlier. What's your take on that?
Well, so what he also apparently was on that tape, he talked about General Milley and that he was talking about whether Iran would be attacked. And he sort of had a paper in his hand and he was kind of waving it around, basically saying this document, that shows that Milley was wrong. He said, I can't show it to you because it's classified. Well, the problem with that is that he now is illustrating, certainly from the prosecutor's perspective, he understood what it meant to have classified information. He understood what it meant not to be able to share it. So all of the things like I can wish it declassified and all that kind of goes out of the window. That's going to be problematic for him, although the news of today is that nobody can find that document. So it looks like Jack Smith or whoever will have a little more work to do to find. They may have to go to Milley and say, what do you know about this document and what was it? But as far as we know right now, nobody knows where that document is.
What's coming up on your show this weekend?
So it'll be a good show, Micah. You're going to wake up for it because
no, I'm not. But okay, I'll tape it. I'll tape it.
So we're going to have Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez of the 25th Ward. He's going to talk about this migrant issue and a few more things. Illinois Representative Jahan Gordon Booth, who's the head budgeter for the Dems in Springfield. We didn't talk about that much, but it's worth noting. I'm going to ask her about why these Republicans seem to say they have never even given a shot at dealing with this budget. We'll see what she has to say. And Special Assistant to the President on Economics, Daniel Hornung, will join me to talk about this debt deal and how it is they made this happen, given the fact that so many people weren't in favor of it.
All right.
If I can say next Tuesday, on the midday, when I do these author interviews, I'll be talking to Luke Russert, Tim Russert's son.
He's got that new book out.
He's got that new book out. He's going to join me at 11:45 on Tuesday, and those are kind of interesting when we do that midday interview.
He looks so much more mature to me now. He looks totally
I
different
think he's
than he
like
used to.
37
Yeah,
now.
oh
Still
my
seems as a
gosh.
young man.
He's getting older, but I guess 3 years traveling the world will do that
I
to you.
guess. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
See you
guys.
later. Have a good weekend.